Supervisors. I would like to welcome you all to this first meeting of the Columbia County Affordable Housing Task Force. This meeting marks the next step in our drive to increase housing affordability and availability throughout the county. In March of last year, many of us convened to discuss the findings of the Hudson Valley Pattern for Progress's Columbia County Housing Brief. The recommendations outlined in the brief in turn inform the strategies developed during the March forum. Creating an affordable housing task force was the first priority among those strategies, and I would like to thank each of you for making the commitment to join. I would also like to thank Duncan Barrett for summarizing the recommendations discussed at the Housing Forum. In addition to the creation of the task force, Columbia County Economic Development Corporation created a housing coordinator position to manage the group's activities. That position was recently filled by Chris Brown, who you'll hear from in just a few minutes. I would also like to thank CEDC for their commitment to creating more housing opportunities. Housing prices continue to increase throughout the region in both the home ownership and rental markets. In December of 2022, the median home list price in Columbia County was approximately $550,000, a 21% increase over the previous year. There are currently fewer than 25 available apartments throughout the county with rents of less than $1,500 a month. The causes of the rising housing cost and housing cost burdens are many and varied. As many as must be our response. But we cannot and should not do it alone. The task force has been assembled not just to develop and act upon the strategies to facilitate housing development, but also to communicate to our communities that the need and the time to act are urgent. Today, we will hear some remarks from Supervisors Brenda Adams of Canaan and Ron Knott of down at Stuyvesant. Next, Michael Tucker of the Columbia County Economic Development Corporation will introduce Chris Brown, CEDC's new housing coordinator. Most importantly, we will hear from you, the task force members themselves. Share with us why you were involved in this push, what you're most hopeful for, and what goals you should hope the task force achieves. Thank you.
Supervisor Adams.
You're on mute, Supervisor.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Brenda Adams, and along with Ron Knott, co-chair of this task force, I'd like to thank Chairman Morell for his leadership and investment in establishing this task force, and each of you for agreeing to participate in this endeavor. The housing needs assessment that the county completed in 2017 and the more recent 2022 housing brief, along with local news and media headlines, have made the critical case for affordable housing in our community. It seems that not a day goes by without some housing news or discussion. Today, however, with us, the real work begins to identify and deliver programs, actions, and relationships to meet the housing needs of our community for now and the future. The task force, with broad representation across the county, includes a diverse group of organizationals, professionals, consultants, and public officials with the knowledge, skills, and commitments to meet this challenge. But the need for housing won't be our only challenge. Another challenge will be to work collaboratively together to identify and deliver priorities and results that will positively engage the community and eventually, I hope, to serve all of our residents and communities. Collaboration and community partnerships are not only the best use of the limited resources, they will enrich and enhance our work and hopefully make us more attractive to developers and funding sources. And finally, I'd like to extend my appreciation and confidence to Mike Tucker, Executive Director, and Chris Brown, Housing Development Coordinator of the Columbia Economic Development Corporation, our fearless leader in this new endeavor.
Supervisor Knott.
Thank you. I am Ron Knott, Town Supervisor of the Town of Stuyvesant. I want to thank and welcome all of you for volunteering to be on this task force and all the advisors involved. I think it's a very diverse group, as Brenda says. For those of you that don't know me, I've been supervisor for a number of years, but I've also spent a lifetime working in the trades in Columbia County as an HVAC contractor. Years ago, I served on town planning board, so I've got some diverse background myself into planning and what the obstacles that developers do face moving forward and trying to get things done. So I look forward to some discussion on trying to rehabilitate some of the housing we've got, as well as to try and look at where we can build new homes. When we started this endeavor, and we talked about having a coordinator on board, sorry about that. I never thought that we would be able to find somebody as well versed as Chris Brown, but in interviewing him and meeting with him so far, I think he's got a wealth of knowledge to help us all guide us through this program. So I welcome Chris on. Thank you much.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Chairman Morrell and Supervisors Adam and Knott. I'm Mike Tucker, the President of Columbia Economic Development. I also welcome you and thank you, both members of the task force and the advisory committee. I also want to welcome Senator Michelle Hinchey, Assemblymember Dee Dee Barrett, and Assemblyman Scott Bendit, who are participating in the call today. As well as we're very fortunate to have with us Adam Bosch from Patterns for Progress, who did the housing brief, which was the document that we used to stimulate conversation at the forum that Chairman Morrell mentioned that we held last March. We're very fortunate to have the moderator of that program, Duncan Barrett, as well as the 4 participants. Darren Scott, the Upstate East Director of Development at the New York State Homes and Community Renewal, who is on the call with us, as well as Joe Chaika, who was with Patterns at the time, but is now with another housing organization on the national level, as well as Supervisor Ryan Skoda from the town of Taconic. So we're very pleased to have the continuity that existed from the preparation and drafting of the study, from the participants and panelists from our program in March, and our elected state representatives with us today. I'd like to also welcome Chris Brown, who joined CEDC 10 days ago. As Supervisor Knott indicated, he has tremendous experience, and we're very fortunate to have him fill this position. He previously worked at the Berkshire Regional Planning Commission. He had been a senior planner in the city of Sarasota, Florida. He was the planning technician at the city of Troy and was the director of operations for the Troy Community Land Bank. He has a bachelor's in public policy from the University of Albany, and he recently moved to Hudson. We'd also like to welcome with us this afternoon Mayor Kamal Johnson from the city of Hudson. At this point, I'd like to move right into the program and turn it over to our new CEDC Housing Coordinator, Chris Brown. Chris?
Muted, Chris. We didn't sign in through Google. There could be some challenges to that. Have that. Yeah.
It's still on mute.
No. How about now? There we are.
Now we got it.
Yeah, so I want to thank Supervisors Knott and Adams for their votes of confidence, and Mike's as well. I've been lucky to meet some of the people on the task force and some of the people on the advisory board. I would like to meet everybody just for a brief meeting at some point over the next couple of weeks, just kind of a one-on-one to really talk about the questions I circulated earlier, what you guys are looking to get out of the task force. And just so we can get to know each other a little more. I know that a lot of you have worked together over the years on housing projects and other projects. So I'm kind of a latecomer to the area and your coalition. But I did live in the county in 2015 and 2016. I lived in Hudson and Ghent, and then jumped across the river for a bit in Catskill. The only reason I really left Hudson was I was priced out of Hudson. And at that point, I was already involved in affordable housing. That really kind of kickstarted my interest. I wasn't, if I could be priced out, then a lot of people were at risk of being priced out. So that's really kind of motivated my career since then over the past 7 or 8 years. As Mike mentioned, I was the director of operations for the Troy Community Land Bank. And I know that there's interest in land banks within this group, and that's something that we'll definitely talk about at some point. But really the redevelopment of vacant buildings and typically we would JV with somebody else and then sell to a first-time homeowner. And little programs like that, I think, can make a lot of difference at the edges. So I'm very interested to hear what everybody has to say today. Just on a personal side, besides professional side, as Mike mentioned, I was in Sarasota as a senior planner. And that about the end of 2020, I started to really miss New York, but oddly enough, I started to really miss the Hudson Valley specifically, which is where I spent probably the least amount of my time when I lived in New York. So I knew I wanted to work in affordable housing and I wanted to do it in the Hudson Valley. When I first came back to New York, I spent a lot of days in the dead of winter just driving around county highways in Columbia County, just to kind of recenter myself and reorient myself in the area. And luckily, this position opened up, and I was lucky enough to get hired. So what I would really like to do is just kind of go around the questionnaire that I sent out last Friday. It was specific to the housing recommendations that were created or that came out of the housing brief and the housing forum. I know that the housing brief were fairly general recommendations. They were great outlines. I think they did a fantastic job on that. And then the forum really kind of narrowed down a little bit exactly within those guidelines. What's the path we want to take? And then to drill down even farther, that's going to be our work over the next couple of months, I think. So I think I'm just going to go down my list. So the first question on there, and Supervisor Adams, I guess alphabetically, you win. I've already received your answers, but I think that it makes sense for everyone to hear each other's in case there are overlapping areas of interest or areas of enthusiasm. So Supervisor Adams, if you don't mind, that the first question was, and this will go for everybody, the same question. How did you come to be appointed to the task force, or what was your interest in being appointed? The second question was, which of the recommendations are you most excited about, or most interested in? And then the third question was, what objective deliverables would you like to see the task force accomplish in the first year of its existence?
Thank you. So 20 years ago, I led the development of a town strategic plan in Canaan that identified an urgent need for housing. And in the intervening years, I had the good fortune to work for 10 plus years with a not-for-profit housing developer of affordable, and in this case, I mean 30 to 60% of county AMI owner-occupied housing. It seemed to me that over that period of time, the housing crisis continued to escalate, and it also there seemed to be the time seemed to be right for our county government to take the lead in identifying programs and actions and to support municipalities in this work to address the many factors in this issue and to leverage our attractiveness to developers. Number two, I'm really excited about the incremental development of the small incremental development of new housing. I'm interested in the idea of a county master plan to address the full range of housing needs in the county, including barriers to development such as infrastructure. And I'm also interested in a housing trust or community land bank to allow for long-term affordable housing. And in terms of goals for this year, I would love to see us return or reapply for federal funds for first-time home buyers and home repairs. I'd like to see us identify the various towns' housing needs so that we can establish common goals and priorities and partnerships. I'd like to develop a toolkit for municipalities to prepare for conversations with developers, and ideally to identify a portfolio of developers that work on a small scale.
Okay, excellent. And I don't want to, I'll refrain from commenting on each of these because there are 12 of you, but I'm absolutely collecting all of this data, and this will be something that we can all circulate within the group. Okay, Mr. Dan Barafaldi, hopefully I correctly pronounced that.
You did quite well. I'm Dan Barafaldi. I've been a resident in the town of Ghent for about 9 years. The documents you sent out indicated I'm on the Ghent Planning Board. That was true until Thursday evening when I was appointed to the Ghent Town Board. So what got me interested in this task force is it's occurred to me over the last probably 15 years that affordable housing is really a crisis in our country, and that both this federal state response and also the free market really hasn't addressed that, hasn't figured it out. So it occurred to me that we need to act locally, and I wasn't satisfied just observing it from the outside. So in addition to being on the town board, I'm retired, but my wife and I have been housing providers or landlords for 23 years. So that's one of the places that I've really, the rubber hits the road for me as I go through the marketplace. I see so many people looking for housing that is just, it's simply not there, or if it's there, it's at twice the price point that most of the folks can afford. So that's kind of what got me here. The recommendations that are most interesting to me are the municipal toolkit, as Brenda so rightly stated. Having worked on a planning board for 7 years, one of the things that I saw over and over again was there are some codes in place for affordable housing development, but it isn't easy. And I think the towns are willing to make it easier, we just don't know how to do it. So that's the recommendation that I think is most interesting to me, followed by kind of a look at small development rather than large projects like Bliss Towers and that kind of thing. And then I think the only objective that I've identified for the coming year, as this task force gets up to force and up to speed, is really that toolkit. I'd like to see us get that out in 6 months and begin a process of communicating that with the various zoning and planning boards in the county.
Excellent, thank you, Dan. Next, I believe, is Mr. Robert Gibson.
Hi, folks. Bob Gibson here. I do know a lot of the members, but there's some that I'm meeting for the first time, and that's great. I'm the Commissioner of Social Services. You could probably see that on the handout that came out, and you might wonder, where does the Commissioner of Social Services come in when you're talking about housing? And I might have wondered that myself 10 years ago. But the fact of the matter is, since I came into the department in 2014, housing has been top on our list of priorities every single year. It touches all across my client base. Initially I was concerned with emergency housing because we started to have a rising homeless population, but I began to see that the lack of workforce housing was really wearing heavy on the client base, and it was leading to a greater stress on the emergency housing part. We began to assist folks who had Section 8 vouchers and were looking for permanent housing, and they were coming up on the list and then having to get waivers to stay up on the list because in their first 45 days they couldn't find anything, and then they couldn't find anything in the next 45 days, and we found ourselves on the phone with our local congressional representative trying to figure out a way where we could get in with HUD and extend even further. So it just became more and more clear to me, that this county is just, it's been very difficult for folks coming in to find housing, to maintain their housing, not get priced out of their housing. And beyond the client base, this is affecting the employees of this agency, the employees of the county generally. So, I'm not sure unless you're involved in one way, shape, or form with the welfare of the citizens of the county generally, if you know of this particular problem. But once you do, it becomes so obvious to you that you wonder how you didn't know it in the past. So, that's what brought me to this. That's what I'm most interested in. And the task to be completed in the next year, I'll leave that to the good offices of Mr. Brown and Mr. Tucker and some of the other folks on this task force. I'm glad just to see movement. I was part of the 2017 movement to get a more detailed study. I've poured through that on several times. And of course, the update that came earlier this year. So, I think if we start to do this from A to Z, I like the banking idea. I like a lot of the ideas, but just affordability. I think we have a workforce that wants to stay in the county, that they overlap with my client base in a lot of areas, and I'd like to be able to see affordability come to that entire spectrum of folks. So glad to be here and look forward to working with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Hughes.
So thank you. Welcome everyone. Thank you to Chairman Morrell and fellow supervisors who appointed me to this committee. A little bit about me. I was born and raised in the city of Hudson, lived there my entire life, moved around a little bit, but I still maintain a full-time residence in Hudson. I served 4 years on the city council and then 14 years on the Columbia County Board of Supervisors. During my time on the Columbia County Board of Supervisors, if anybody knows me, I was very involved with social justice issues, with housing being at the forefront of that. And so I've worked with a lot of developers. Duncan Barrett, for example, I worked with him. I worked with a lot of developers in and around Hudson and Columbia County to try to move forward affordable housing, going as far back as 2003, 2004. Mayor Scalera was at the forefront of that in the city of Hudson. And you can see where the housing was starting to be compressed in Hudson as people started moving up from, the city and Massachusetts and other areas, moving into Hudson and increasing what at the time was a very affordable rent. But some of the issues that would be, amplified or amplified was when you start talking about affordable housing, and I hope we clear this up because it's going to be very important about how we message this. You start talking about affordable housing, everybody puts it all in one basket. You have low-income housing, then you have affordable housing based on the AMI, then you have workforce housing and emergency housing. Well, when you talk to people, it's all one and the same. And I think it's going to be very important for us as a group to clarify those silos so that we can move that ball forward. As far as home ownership, I'm big on home ownership, and I especially being a person of color, because I believe it's the way that someone can start building economic wealth for their family is by creating and owning homes. And that really lacks within the Black community. So I'm very interested in that. So like the commissioner outlined, some of the things that some of the things that I would like to see happen or I would want to happen. I'm glad to be on this committee, but I really don't have a specific idea as of yet, other than creating more ownership opportunities. I think the toolkit would be a good start, because that gives people upper hand in being able to move forward, especially the developers, because it will be a challenge, and we all know that. So I guess that's where I'm at right now. I'm happy to be on this committee, and hopefully I can offer some insight as we move forward.
Thank you. And I just want to underscore, I absolutely agree. I think the messaging is vital. I think that's a bit of a conversation. We'll have a little bit of time at the end of this for housekeeping items. And that's something that I definitely want to touch on before we convene for the night. Next is Miss Kane, I believe.
Great. Hi there. I'm Meredith Kane. I am delighted to be here with you guys. I think I'm meeting most of you actually for the first time. I am an almost 40-year resident of Copiague. And I came to this because about a year ago, Copiague, Hillsdale, and Ankrum put together a housing task force from the 3 towns. Figuring that none of us had enough available opportunity in our towns by ourselves to get a developer interested in doing housing. So we thought that maybe by combining the resources and the know-how of the 3 towns, we might actually be able to get something going. Recently, so just a little bit about me. My background, I'm a commercial real estate lawyer. And I have, over the course of my career, actually worked on representing a lot of nonprofits as well as some for-profit developers building affordable housing. So I'm pretty knowledgeable about the tools that there are in Albany, about the way that you piece together the subsidies and as well as local incentives to be able to make something happen. So very recently in Copiague too, just to add a little more context to this, we set up a zoning task force actually to do what we're hoping to do here with our municipal toolkit, which I think is really important to get started on immediately, to look at our zoning resolution and to try to figure out what it would take in order to make it friendlier to affordable housing and to be able to push, to be able to actually push projects through. We've identified after about a year of thinking about where are the opportunities in a small rural town, like our 3 small rural towns in Southeast Columbia County, with no infrastructure, land which is difficult to subdivide, and basically jobs, but not access to an enormous number of jobs, but nevertheless a real need for housing to fulfill the local jobs and in the area. We basically looked at a couple of things that we think are immediate priorities, and I think they fit into what we could do as a group. The first thing we're looking at is how we really take accessory dwelling units and try to push them forward and incentivize people to create them on their properties. So, we really looked at 3 things, and I'd love to see these sort of push forward. First is just making sure that zoning works and is easy, and that there are resources available to homeowners in order to be able, so that they know what to do to take that barn or that garage or that outbuilding, that is sitting on their property and and sitting underused, and actually turn it into housing. The idea is to do rental housing. That's something that we also see as a big need. I totally agree on home ownership housing as well. And rental housing, there's just a need for every type of housing, as well as create real estate tax policy that would not penalize, doing affordable accessory dwelling units. And I know that the state has come up with a financing program, actually a grant program, to subsidize the creation of accessory dwelling units. I'd love to see us put together a whole package countywide and really make that available and turn homeowners into, let them generate extra revenues from rentals and have that create, as much affordable housing as we can. So that's sort of one area of a lot of interest. And I think we can make a lot of progress on that pretty quickly. The second area is inclusionary housing, basically dealing with large scale subdivisions. And there are a couple of them that are proposed in Copeg now. I think that, it's something that probably people are seeing around the county. Pressure on farmland and subdivision is a way to go. We think the time is really ripe to require development of affordable housing as part of a subdivision. So figuring out how to do that well with the appropriate incentives as well as requirements, and figuring out long-term management of what that would be, which I think fits into the housing trust fund idea. Because if you think about, what you're going to create when if you have a developer actually build X% of the units as affordable, who's going to continue to own and manage those in the long term? How do they remain affordable? So I think the idea of the housing trust fund really, really works well there. So that, but the first step, of course, also is reforming the zoning code and doing it in a smart, sensible way so that it works and putting it in place. So those are I think our priorities from the southeastern part of the county for things we'd like to move ahead on in the next year, and things I think that would be great and we can do countywide.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm not going to touch on all of those things, but I do want to touch on one of the very first things that you said. I think that's Rojan, I believe, is the reference. Just the fact that there was already kind of a grassroots, localized intermunicipal group working before this larger one got started is fantastic. I think that's really the only way to address housing issues. Excuse me. Obviously, each town has housing issues, but it's not even a regional issue. It's at this point a global issue. So we're really only going to be able to address it as a coalition. Next is Kirk Niller.
I guess to put me on the spot here. What am I going to do? My name is Kirk Niller. I have 3 insurance agencies in the county. One in Copeg, as Meredith has discussed that area, so I know that area quite well. Chatham, and of course, Glacier. And I'm also board chair of the hospital, Columbia Memorial Health, and I had a seat on the Albany Mid-Health System. I also have a separate farming operation. And
Hi, Kurt. You're breaking up a little bit.
Oh, don't know why that could be. Is it any better? No.
No, it's still broken up pretty good.
Okay. Well, you know what? Why don't you just pass on me then? Just
Try turning off your camera.
I'm sorry?
Do you have your camera off? You try turning that off.
Let's turn the camera off. Okay. Let me see. Does that make any difference?
A little bit, not
right.
much.
Just go ahead. Go ahead and pass on me. Go to the next person.
Okay. Also, just real quick, I've just been told we have 57 viewers on YouTube. So it's a well-attended event so far. Next would be Supervisor Knott, actually.
Thank you. No doubt I'm on the committee because Chairman Morell asked me to work on the committee. So I'm here. I think one of the biggest things I look forward to is to learning from this diverse group. Certainly housing is a very important issue in the county. And as we've heard from the governor, a statewide important issue. As someone who's grown up here in the county, raised a family and now grandchildren in the area, I certainly agree with Mr. Hughes on the idea of home ownership is a huge, important thing. And I'd love to see how we can make housing more affordable for those of us that want to live here and our families stay here. So that's real important to me. I do recognize, as I said, from the trades issue that we're not going to lower the cost of lumber and concrete. But I think as people spoke about this toolkit, maybe we can help get regulations out of the way so that developers can build things more affordably. So I look forward to working with the group and hearing from you all and trying to do some good things. Thank you.
Luckily, lumber has taken care of itself a little bit in the past couple of months. Concrete, not quite there yet.
No, I know, but
Yeah. Okay, Brandon Mullins.
How are you guys? My name is Brandon. I've been from Germantown for my whole life. I'm 30 years old. I currently work for 3 different towns. I'm a building inspector for Germantown, Livingston, and Red Hook in Dutchess County. Personally, I'm here because housing prices are ridiculous. I'm 30 years old and can't afford a thing. It's as sad as that is to say. I think one thing that's absolutely ruining it is short-term rentals. Short-term rentals are going for $300 a night minimum. So if you think about what's affordable for an apartment, $1,500, $1,800. But if somebody's renting that out short-term rental, they got to do that for 5 or 6 nights in a month, and that's covered. And I think that's ruining it for a lot of people. I see a lot of young people starting families and not being able to afford a house. They have to move out of Columbia County. And I think we should fix it somehow. I don't know how we're going to do it, but I think this is a good start to try.
Yeah, thank you. I know that the governor's office, who obviously housing is a major focus, they're looking at some short-term rental, state-level short-term rental legislation. It seems like a lot of the housing prescriptions they're talking about are actually modeled on Massachusetts laws. And if they do follow the Massachusetts kind of model for short-term rentals, that's actually really good news for the county and for anyone who wants to live in the county permanently. Next is Rob Perry.
You guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. I'm Rob Perry, Superintendent of Public Works for the City of Hudson. I was chairman of the Planning Commission in Hudson for 3 years, appointed in 2005, maybe 4 years. So as the chairman of the Planning Commission, obviously zoning, well adept in. We did during my tenure, the approval of the Crosswinds, which was the workforce housing, conducted that review and approval, as well as Academy Hill, which is on the top of Russman Avenue, which, believe it or not, at the time it was actually affordable, not necessarily like it is today. From that, I was elected president of the Common Council in 2007. And so during that, my tenure there, we had a affordable housing kind of group that was put together. And we talked about land trusts and land banks and things of that caliber. So I only was in that position for a year before I became superintendent of public works for the city, but in the first years, Brenda Adams, who was on here, was very active with Habitat for Humanity. She was running it, obviously. And Hudson was, at that point, donating parcels to Habitat for Development. So, at that point, we started dealing, was boots on the ground, getting involved with, making it whatever the plan was fit and work. And, since then, I deal with developers throughout Hudson of all scale, plumbers, contractors, engineers. My principal goal is that I am the liaison between what's approved by either the planning board or what's permitted within the existing city code and state building code and make it work with what we have as an infrastructure. So I'm understanding that's why the chairman selected me. I'm also chairman of the Columbia County Water and Sewer District number 1. That's very exciting. I can't tell you how much riveting that one is. And so, that's my role. My role is to figure out how to take what's planned and what's designed and figure out how to make it work. You got to do it. You need roads and you need infrastructure. So that's me. That's all I got.
Okay, thank you. I'm very optimistic that the infrastructure now law will see some monies delivered locally to municipalities and to counties. We absolutely need more infrastructure. Next is Tim Stalker. Tim Stalker.
Yeah. Hi, good evening. My reason for joining was I received an email from Chairman Morrell and made some inquiries, and I I'm glad to see that the county is willing to make the commitment. And I know Supervisor Ron Knott a little bit. If he's involved, we can do some stuff here. And I'm a general contractor, work by myself, but I have a good relationship. And as many of you know, there's a lot of good contractors in the area, but they have trouble finding help, maintaining help. A lot of times people come from across the river just to break even probably by the time they travel over here and make their way back. I served on my local planning board in all town of Austerlitz for 14 years. And in all that time I was on the planning board, I never was able to approve a parcel of land that was equal to the 1 acre parcel that we had purchased 45 years ago. Because of the way the market was over on this side of the county, or in this region of the county, large lots prevailed, and currently we're in the process of redoing our comprehensive plan. And just as a side note, the other night, we had a discussion about what affordable housing actually means. Well, an hour later, we really hadn't nailed it down to our satisfaction to get it into the comprehensive plan. So we're going to talk to Nan Stolzenberg, the lady who's helping us with that part. But that seems to see what her ideas are. But it's a long overdue subject, and I've been on the county planning board for a number of years, working with Patrice Perry, Rob's wife, and many of the supervisors in that. So I just look forward to. I don't know the ins and outs of all of the nuts and bolts. You mentioned toolboxes for municipalities. I want to hear more about the details of these things before I say, yeah, let's, because I know if you don't have the right tools in the toolbox, you're going back home to get the right ones. And everything's a half hour away from here. So that's all I got to say about that. Well, I'm a big proponent of George Bailey, It's a Wonderful Life, when he said people are better citizens if they have their own house. That's one line that stuck with me after I got to thinking about this group, this task force, and I look forward to working and meeting everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Yeah, the definition of affordable housing, we talked about it a little bit earlier. I think we'll come back to it. All housing is affordable to someone, right? So really, when you're talking about affordable housing, you're affordable to whom? I do want to go back. I saw Mr. Neller jump back on. Do you want to take another shot at it?
Yeah, I have that. No?
It's still the same.
All right. You know what? I'll pass. It's something to do with my wireless connection.
You could also, you could send it, you could put it in chat. Just, if you've got the answers to those questions already thought out, or if you just want to, put your little blurb in there, just so I've got it before.
Move on. That's okay. All right.
I'll touch base with you. Next is Kelly Sweet.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kelly Sweet. I'm a community engagement officer with Berkshire Taconic Community Foundation. I'm really thrilled to be here, and I thank all of you for taking your time to join this important effort. I was chosen by Berkshire Taconic to join this committee on our behalf, primarily to help identify opportunities for where philanthropy can potentially make an impact, and help with connections, potentially grant opportunities, and connections with alternative funders. I also am born and bred lifelong resident of Hillsdale. Grew up in an owner-occupied multifamily house and watched my father acquire some rental properties. So I wasn't a landlord for many years and sold them all because it was misery. So I do have that unique perspective to bring. Also was part of Hillsdale's comprehensive plan creation back in 2007, 2008 with the Project for Public Spaces, and have always been interested and noticed this definitely on the eastern side of Columbia County. Way back before I even worked for Berkshire Taconic, you may remember Tina Sharp did some Housing Us community outreach. I was a part of that before even taking a position at Berkshire Taconic. So I'm thrilled to be here, and if anybody needs resources, please try me. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. And then lastly, we have Mr. Dennis Wetlick.
Oh, thank you very much. So I'm Dennis Wedlick. from Barlow Swedlick Architects, and we are based in Hudson. I'm an architect, and maybe we call me a rural planner. I've been working on single-family housing and rural subdivisions in Columbia County since 1985. And the first thing I want to say is I think that the people of Columbia County should be very proud of the work they have done over the years. When we first began working with local organizations, there were no comprehensive plans. There were hardly any rules at all about zoning, subdivisions, and all of that hard work. I think that we all know we have incredible open spaces. We have a thriving agricultural economy, which is something that really everybody should pat our backs about. So I am very interested in helping the rural workforce, because you cannot sustain any of that hard work without a rural workforce. On the flip side, I'm very concerned about undoing all the hard work that all of these communities have done over the year. So there's a reason that we have these comprehensive and these zoning plans in rural communities. They are what people voted for. They are what people want. They want to preserve the rural character, the rural ecology, and the rural economy. So I do believe there is a way to do both. I completely agree with Mr. Hughes that you cannot solve all housing problems as if it's all the same. And I think that urban and suburban solutions may not work in our rural communities. And so I'm hoping that we have our rural communities fast look at land banking, because you don't have to have the solution to start banking land. So, I am really excited about that opportunity to create housing trust, again, because you don't have to develop housing to create a housing trust. As far as the mission statement, in rural areas, workforce housing crisis is a conservation crisis. And in my opinion, it's not a problem about not in my backyard. I've met with every town board member, it seems, and every group, like the Rojan group people, and they are all interested in having a solution. I think the problem is that we have too many other organizations that say it's not my job. It's not in my mission statement. And we can't do this on our own. We're going to need a lot of organizations to help us. And we have to raise awareness that it is part of their mission statement, that helping us in rural areas provide affordable, high quality rural workforce housing for our essential rural workforce. That's the people who live and work in our towns. That is a conservation issue. It is a state issue. It is a federal issue. It's an environmental issue. All those other organizations, I hope we can convince them to help us with this mission.
Thank you, Dennis. Kirk, were you able to call in? No, I can't hear him. Can anyone else? No? Okay. Well, I'll look forward to your answers in my email then. I do want to thank you to all the task force members. And again, I'll be touching base individually with each of you before we get to our next meeting, which we'll talk a little bit about at the end. I do want to give a special recognition to the members of the advisory board. Just since there are 12 members of the task force, and this is the first meeting, it was kind of an introductory period. We didn't think there'd be enough time to get to 22 people's worth of their history on housing and what they're excited about. So that's something that we'll do for another meeting. But thank you to everyone on the advisory board, anyone who's on the task force. Like Tim, you mentioned, I don't know all the things about housing. I think between everyone on the advisory board and the other members of the task force, we have a broad and deep breadth of knowledge. So I think that those members are going to be indispensable. So thank you very much to everyone who accepted their position on the advisory board. There are a couple of questions in chat. Mayor Johnson, I believe you have a question that you would like to ask.
Yes. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for being a part of this. You know, this is a big step for the county. Congratulations, Chris, on the new position. I just had one suggestion. We have a housing director in my office who has been working on a lot of this for the past 2 years. And I was a little confused why she wasn't on the full task force and just on the advisory board, because she has already produced 2 full projects and other efforts. And we do have some specific start points that we would love to partner with the county about. And I don't know if she's available. I know she's on the call to talk about some of that stuff now, but we do also, we're working on a community land trust and a bunch of other initiatives that could really work if we provide, you know, full county support around things, because we can't house everyone here in Hudson. So I don't know if she can get a couple minutes to speak about some of the stuff that we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess this will be my way of introducing myself to Michelle Tula, who I've not had the pleasure of meeting yet. Michelle, if you want to pop in, feel free. Absolutely.
Sure. Hi, Chris. Hi, everyone. I guess, yeah, I'm really excited by seeing all these diverse groups of people together and seeing all the enthusiasm for housing. I guess I'm looking to hear maybe a little bit more clarification on the role of the advisory board and the task force, because we do have a lot of experts on the call who have a lot of experience with this. And I'll just say that I've heard from you all, I've heard interest in short-term rental regulation, housing trust funds, small-scale development, housing rehab projects, homeownership opportunities for first-time home buyers, and land trusts. And we have all of that happening in Hudson right now. So really hoping that we can kind of collaborate on these efforts and looking to see how we can get moving. Because I know, you know, when you have once a month meetings, sometimes you can get efforts stalled, and I really want to see us kind of move forward and take some concrete steps. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that those sorts of clarifying questions will get sorted out as, you know, kind of as the weeks, hopefully not the months, just the weeks go by. But that is something that came up during the Economic Development Committee meeting of the Board of Supervisors the other night. That very often task forces, working groups, things like that can just turn into talking groups. So it's very important to me that we have actionable items that we're always working on, that there's no, you know, we don't go from 1 month to another and nothing has happened. So it's very much just, it's almost like a development pattern. So I'm very interested in just keeping the ball rolling. And we'll be touching base next week. So we can kind of firm up some of these things, especially Mr. Rared, to both your points of how the city and the county can basically work in synergy. I think that's going to be really important. And I think we had, if there are any state legislators that would like to pose any questions or any comments.
I'm happy just to say a quick hello here. Hi, everyone. Most of you I have met, some are new. I'm Senator Michelle Hinchy, and I've been messaging in the chat. So just want to say really first and foremost, thank you to everyone here who's a part of this task force and for your commitment in solving the issues around housing in Columbia County and in our region. It's something that we are deeply focused on. We're excited to see and learn how we can partner with you. I know Michelle and Mayor Johnson, you know, we've been in touch over the last handful of months talking about the funding that we've gotten and how it is or is not available to a city like Hudson and a county like Columbia. We were able to lead, myself and my office, in the budget last year, we were able to lead and secure the largest investment in upstate housing that our state has ever had, because most people think about a housing crisis in more densely populated urban areas, not in more rural communities. But we all know, living it, that's just not the case. So we are looking to build on those investments, everything from the small rental development initiative that helps build smaller rental units that are affordable instead of most of that money going to big developments. This is 20 units or less. including the Restore program that helps low income and moderate income seniors and people with disabilities help with home repairs. Also converting old hotels and motels into affordable and supportive housing. That's happening in Kingston now. But one of the big challenges that we've seen and learned through our conversations with some of you is a lot of this funding goes to affordable housing corporations, which to this point, I'm not sure if anything has changed since our last conversation, but Columbia County doesn't have, although I know Michelle, you and others are in conversations to work on that, which is great. And so we're here to be helpful. We're also here to learn those gaps so we can try to fix them at the state level. And we've already been talking through with some people on this call separately more at statewide initiatives, how we can shift some of that funding to go to places that need it that may not have AHCs. We're also really focused on short-term rentals. Right now, as I mentioned in the chat, we put in a bill. I know the governor is focused on taxing in the budget. I don't know how much broader her initiatives will be. I'm hopeful, robust, but we have legislation that we've entered that covers a lot. No unfunded mandates or mandates period for the towns. It's really the state taking the perspective to be helpful and provide information and some enforcement and some teeth, not telling you anything you need to do or sending anything. So if you have any questions though, check out the legislation. We put it in the chat, but we can also email it around. We're here to answer any questions, and just thank you so much for your work on this. And please always reach out for anything that you need help with the state on this issue or questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the only thing we have left on our agenda for today is a little bit of housekeeping, but since we promised it at the beginning, I'm going to cap this, I think, at 10 minutes. And if we don't figure it out, we'll figure it out at the next meeting. The recommendation from the Housing Forum was that this position in that recommendation was called a Housing Development Coordinator, but the task force was an Affordable Housing Task Force. So I guess the idea is to match those two things up. If it's an Affordable Housing Task Force, it should be an Affordable Housing Coordinator. If it's going to be a Housing Development Coordinator, then maybe it should be a Housing Development Task Force. So just so that those are in alignment, to me, and I know that there are a lot of opinions about this, to me, the question is, do you just want to talk about housing for two reasons? One, it's inclusive. You know, we need housing at all levels. Obviously, kind of luxury housing is going to take care of itself. You know, $700,000 single family homes, the market will take care of that. But just talking about housing includes housing at all levels. And as Mr. Hughes mentioned, when you say affordable housing, that conjures something in people's minds. And sometimes when you walk into a room, you're already on the back foot because you're starting from that position. Now, the other side of this is that affordable housing shouldn't have a negative connotation like that anymore. It is what it is. It's affordable housing. It's housing that's affordable to people at a variety of income levels. So that's really just kind of, planting your stick in the ground and saying, no, this is the issue. This is how we're going to address it. We're going to call it what it is. We're not going to back away from it. I am flexible, whatever I think the group at large would prefer. I could go either way. I think they both have merits. I don't really have a strong opinion about either one of those two options. But I think deciding what we're going to call ourselves is something that we might be able to sort out tonight, but we should certainly sort out within the next week or two.
I suggest you
Yeah, it's not something that we need. I mean, there are 22 people on the call. It's not something that we absolutely need to get nailed down tonight. My business card's unprinted, so don't worry about that. So we can sort that out, by the end of next week for sure. I think we should know what we want to call ourselves. And if it has to be, obviously there'll be a conversation. I don't think I'm just going to, count how many people say I prefer this and how many people say I prefer that. So it's something that we can discuss, but just as a general kind of feeling, if people could just let me know what their preference would be for the group. And then my position title will just follow the group's choice.
Hi, Chris, if I could.
Sure.
I certainly can't speak for the other members, but you and other members, people on the committee have made a great point. When we talk about affordable housing and you start talking about wages, it's affordable for who? And so that's where I think the rubber meets the road. And so if we were to call ourselves a housing committee, housing coalition, I would be perfectly fine with that. If the committee wanted to go affordable housing, that's okay too. I mean, we could call the name is really not important to me. It's the work. But as we go along with this and we start thinking about the various silos, whether we call it housing committee or affordable housing, one of the things that we also need to be cognizant of is the tax structure, because when we look at, and I've been doing this work for a while, when we look at when people start talking about low income housing on that scale, we know that population comes with certain needs, transportation being right at the top of them. So if you were to look to move a project like that further out in the county, it becomes more and more prohibitive for those individuals to try to make it to the Epic Center, which what we would call the city of Hudson, where the hospital and all the services that are being provided, which goes to what some of these people were saying as far as it is really an important need to develop urban housing and rural housing, because you're going to have people that are working in those areas. But if you're developing rural housing for people who are working out there, in some cases, they may have transportation. They may have a decent income to whereas they are able to access the services that people who are on the low income housing spectrum may not be able to. So as we go along, we seriously want to think about wages and also tax structure, along with the different silos in housing.
Okay, thank you. I see Dennis has his hand up. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. We schedule this from 4 to 5. It's really an introductory thing. I can get lost in the weeds on all of these topics for hours. So thankfully Mike checked in to make sure that I wouldn't do that. So we'll hear from Dennis. Definitely, I want everybody to think about, the title. It seems like there are already quite a few people that are okay with affordable coming out, and I think that makes sense. Dennis.
Yes, I do want to build on what Mr. Hughes said again. I think that it's important to realize that people are suffering from housing insecurity and housing poverty at higher AMI levels than 60 to 80%. And this is particularly true in rural areas. So I think that a lot of times affordable is targeting one particular sector of the problem, which is those in the lower income levels. And unfortunately, it costs more to live in more rural areas. So you have to have 3 jobs there. Therefore, you're then out of the ability to collect the subsidies that those that are working in urban areas can afford to tap into lower incomes.
It's a really good point. Dennis, I think I just saw your hand raised, lagged a little bit. Okay, so I think, as I said off the top, I do want to touch base with everyone individually. I've already scheduled some of those meetings. I think we'll set another meeting of certainly the task force. We'll figure out, Michelle, it's a great point. What actually is the nature of the interaction between the task force and the advisory board? Are these meetings all going to be 22 people every time? Is that unworkable? That's something that, Dan, I agree. That's something that will definitely work out over the next few weeks. But yes.
Hi, this is Lisa Galena. I'm sorry, I've had to be on the phone during. I'm the executive director of Cornell Cooperative Extension. And I just want to, just from the agricultural perspective, just point out that all of the housing ideas that you're suggesting, all are important to agriculture. Affordable renting, ancillary housing on property, and it is becoming more and more problematic for our agricultural community to maintain their workers because of issues in zoning that are maybe prohibitive also with the cost. So I'm going to just give you this example. I have 2 staff that have left because they could not find rent under $900 and they were making $56,000. So when we look at the AMI on that, of course they couldn't afford to stay in the area, and they were stellar. but they left because they could not find affordable housing. Now, when I think about what our agricultural and producers allowed to do, they don't have the option to offer all the healthcare benefits and everything else like Extension does. But we really have to think about the worker who doesn't have all of the, from the first front of the line worker to even into management. We're looking at people that can't afford housing and that can't help us grow food. And that is so key that we maintain and reemphasize our strength in agriculture in Columbia County.
No, that's a great point. And I have seen concessions for agricultural workers, but it never seems like it's enough. It's definitely one of our, I don't want to say vulnerable tranches of employees, but compared to how important they are for the ecosystem, I think they're definitely in the top 5 or so. Okay, so I will touch base with everybody. The YouTube version of this video will be made available to you all if you'd like to rewatch it again, just to catch some people's comments if you didn't happen to catch it the first time around. And I think we'll try to set tentatively, once we figure out everyone's schedule, will the last Wednesday of each month, we'll just, as a potential date, we'll just kind of put a pin in that for now. If it turns out that doesn't work out, we'll fix that. But I think all of these things I would like to have sorted out by the end of next week, so that way the next time we have a meeting, we'll be able to just get right into it. And the agenda will be an agenda of action items, not an agenda of housekeeping items. And I believe, is Chair Morell, did we lose the chair? Okay, I guess that's on me. Thank you, everybody. Kirk, I'll keep an eye out for your answers. I cannot wait. Everyone's waiting now. And I will talk to each of you in turn over the next couple of weeks.
Great. Thank you all. Look forward
Thanks,
to
Brad.
working together.